The dark, cold reaches of space can inspire many different emotional responses, from feelings of wonder and exploration to those of fear. The isolation amidst the cosmos in particular can be the leading factor of fear, and few forms of media do it better than Dead Space. Borrowing heavily from films such as Alien and Event Horizon, Dead Space begins as you assume the role of Isaac Clarke, a trouble engineer aboard a small vessel responding to distress calls from the planet cracker ship, the USG Ishimura, which his wife is also serving aboard. As Isaac and his crewmates approach the ship, it quickly becomes apparent that not all is well with this mission as the shuttle's guidance system suddenly malfunctions, causing them to crash into the hangar bay of the Ishimura. After arising from the devastation, they begin to explore the vast, seemingly empty derelict ship, only to discover that the crew of the ship isn't quite human anymore, and their situation and odds of survival have gone from bad to worse. Dead Space is a third-person survival horror shooter similar to Resident Evil 4 that employs the use of various 25th century tools such as the plasma cutter, as well as your standard forms of weaponry, like pulse rifles, to literally cut through the abominous denizens of the Ishimura. The gunplay takes a step back from the usual shoot for the head mechanic and encourages the player to take out the limbs for a more effective kill, as the necromorphs don't necessarily need a head to survive. Pacing of Dead Space is measured, building tension. You'll experience long periods of time without ever seeing a necromorph, but nonetheless be sitting on the edge of your seat. From the hopeless atmosphere and excellent use of sound and shadows, to invoke the feeling that you are always being stalked. You'll frequently enter a room as the lights flicker on and off, as shadows play tricks on you only to have the lights come on to reveal the terrors waiting for you. While certainly a bit more action-packed than many older survival horror games, Dead Space manages to balance the two very well, making it one of the few large games to be able to rightfully claim the title of survival horror this generation. Besides finding weapons and ammunition from the holds of the vessel and stomping apart its dwellers, you'll also be able to upgrade your weapons and gear from blueprints you find through various self-service store hubs around the ship. If you can marshal enough power nodes, you'll be able to upgrade any weapon from pea shooter to hand cannon through the extensive branching upgrade system. The necromorphs themselves are very well designed, with inspiration of the design being car crash victims, as they're essentially what happens when an alien virus is able to manifest itself within the human form, deforming it into a relentless killing machine, sometimes requiring multiple hosts to make some of the larger enemies. Don't expect discrimination, as the virus doesn't seem to matter if you're man, woman, or child. The music helps instill the feelings of claustrophobia and isolation, as it is often very foreboding and oppressive, with subtle cues of ambient noises to make it more unsettling. The game heightens this further by having no traditional menu system, and forcing you to stay within the gameplay as most interactions take place within a real-time heads-up display. As Isaac progresses through the ship, he'll slowly bring it online by visiting the various levels and facilities such as engineering, the bridge, or the medical wing. The areas are generally visited multiple times with slightly different to drastically improve revisits of the areas depending on what deck, adding a bit of backtracking to the game. For the most part, while all similarly themed and colored for consistency within the ship, the locations have variation enough to keep them distinguishable from one another at quick glance. Often you'll be posed with another terrifying aspect of space, man being out of his element, as the game will occasionally have you don your oxygen tank and traverse into space itself, adding some variance from the typical, as you'll now be burdened with a lack of gravity and muted volume to adjust for the vacuum of space. Isaac for the most part is a faceless, speechless man, and the story is told vicariously through the two surviving crewmates, as well as audio logs similar to BioShock or the files found in older Resident Evil games. For a survival horror game, this tends to be the most effective way to tell a story, rather than with interrupting scripted cutscenes as you feel you're stumbling upon little pieces of a bigger mystery as to the tragic final events of the crew and how it was all caused, while the main plot can continue to focus on survival. Dead Space is one of the best examples of survival horror for this current generation, albeit one of the only. The game suffers a bit from an easy difficulty on the first playthrough, taking a bit of excitement and horror out of the game, as you'll soon feel powerful enough to take on any challenge the necromorphs might pose. Despite its somewhat repetitive nature, Dead Space is full of thick atmosphere, a solid ambient story, and legitimate scares. Few games today manage to capture the feeling of tension that EA Redwood accomplished, making this a definite must-play as the first entry of the series.